Protecting Abandoned Children. We'll examine what Nigeria is doing to help its at-risk population.
After a lifetime of calling for democratic change, Zimbabwean opposition leader Morgan Tsvangirai dies at 65. We'll take a look at his life and legacy.
Our festival is changing the narrative of the Democratic Republic of Congo, one song at a time. Africa 54 starts right now.
Hello and thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring stories near and far. I'm Chamberlain Oso at Channels Television here in Lagos. I'm joined by Vincent Makori at Voice of America in Washington.
Well, thanks a lot, Chamberlain. I'm Vincent Makori at our global headquarters in Washington, D.C. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Now, let's start off with a look at what Nigeria is doing to help its abandoned children. Chamberlain also in Lagos brings you that story.
That's right. Every human being is entitled to certain fundamental rights, regardless of age, sex, or race, whether they be natural or legal rights, such as the right to life. Governments got a duty to ensure that the rights of citizens are protected, especially vulnerable populations. Abandoned children are one of such groups who the Nigerian government and other stakeholders are seriously or continuously trying to make provisions for. Here's that story.
The smallest unit of society is the family, which serves as the building block for procreation and socialization, among other values. The family serves other purposes, including economic, protective, and emotional functions, the absence of which hinders proper child development. According to UNICEF, an estimated 8.6 million children are orphaned by various reasons, such as conflict, and in some cases, children are abandoned by unprepared parents, denying them the necessary family support. Many of such children end up walking on streets, exposed to dangers such as kidnapping and sexual assault. Government and non-government organizations continuously work to cater for such children, and one woman familiar with the task of caring for abandoned children believes more should be done to protect minors.
We do our best by providing everything that they need, because when you allow a child to grow wildly on the streets, then of course that child is going to be a source of torment to the society. These are the children that we end up seeing as drug addicts. We end up seeing as they end up being trafficked, trafficked abroad, used for sex exploitation. A lot of evil do happen to children like that, and that's why we must take them off the streets.
Nigeria adopted the Child Rights Act in 2003, but its efficacy lies in the law being enacted at the state level. To date, barely half of the country's 36 states have passed the act. In Lagos State, the government boasts of a number of programs and measures aimed at protecting vulnerable children.
Concerning children being abandoned, we need to let the teenagers know that if you are not ready, you cannot have them. You can only have them when you're ready, because it's mostly done by teenagers. So we try as much as possible to sensitize teenagers that if you're not ready, you don't have to bring these kids to the world. It's an ongoing thing.
So what goes into nurturing a child, and how much can the family structure guarantee that the child becomes a valuable addition to the society?
As much as possible, it all starts in the house, at home. Without love, without normal training, without happiness, the child cannot actually bring forth a good thing out there.
Children excluded from family support may find it difficult to find their place in society and enjoy their rights. Efforts continue to raise awareness for the need to protect the Nigerian child, while intense advocacy also continues for all states to enact the Child Rights Act and implement other children-focused initiatives.
Let's take a closer look at the rights of abandoned children as provided for by the Child Rights Act and the level of protection the law offers them. Well, joining us to discuss that is Chinwe Onoha, who is a legal practitioner. Thank you for coming on Africa 54.
Thank you.
Could you tell us what do you describe as the core fundamentals of the Child Rights Act, or the objectives, basically?
The Child Rights Act provides for the protection and care of the children, the right to family life, the right to health, and the right to education, I should say.
Well, what kind of provisions, how would you describe the provisions that cater for abandoned children?
Looking at Article 20, subsection 2 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, the abandoned children that are placed outside the family environment, an alternative to family environment should be provided to them by the state, in this case, the government. Bringing it down to what we have in Lagos State, the Section 2, Sub 1 of the Child Rights Law of Lagos State, 2007, also did provide that the government should make provision for the protection and care of the children on the streets, directly or indirectly. Because according to that provision, the government made provisions for agencies, institutions, and various bodies that legally are responsible for the welfare of children.
I know there was this debate some time ago about domesticating the act in different parts of the country, different states. How successful or otherwise would you say we've been with that so that children can get care and protected across the country?
So far, we have about 24 states that have actually adopted those rights, are actually implemented in their own states, which leaves about 12 states with children hanging. In such states, those rights cannot actually be enforced. Then the problem we have with enforcement in the states that have actually adopted these rights are issues of effective implementation. So I think basically it's not enough to adopt those rights. We should be able to figure out modalities to be able to enforce them.
So looking at the big picture in terms of the law, implementation, and those institutions that are supposed to ensure that they comply, what would you like to see, having followed this for a while?
Well, I would say that we should probably go back to the family. It's to the wider setting of the family and community, because the children, abandoned children, or the children on the streets, are basically we can categorize them into two. We have children off the streets and children on the streets. Now you find out that the children on the streets basically come from a family, but they go back to the family in the night, but basically during the day, they're on the streets. Now, the children off the streets live and work there. They don't have the family ties. Now, the gray aspect of it that actually should be our problem is the children that fall within the category of on the street and off the street. These are the ones coming from our families. Now, when the parents go to work and don't give these kids attention, we have the risk of them facing abandonment or depression, and they end up in the streets. That should be the greater problem.
So clearly we still have some work to do about this one.
Exactly.
All right, Chinwe Onoha, thank you for coming on Africa 54 today.
Thank you.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Now, coming up, beauty and violence on Mambila Plateau, with clashes threatening the tourism industry, and Mambila's call for peace.